I'm going to introduce now, first, each one of the panelists is going to tell about themselves a little bit. I'll just tell you that Roman and I know each other not for so long, but we became very good buddies. Whitney and I have met each other thanks to this conference in a way, just a while ago. And we actually met in France, I think, the first time, Scott, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
As well as with Gigi, I met you in France first before, no, I met you in California first before meeting you in your...
France.
Yeah, yeah. So...
We met in California.
Yeah, that's right. You guys met in California.
And Roman and I met in France.
So I'm going to first give the, I think I'll first allow Gigi Wang to tell you, just tell who you are first, so because most people don't read the program. Since most people don't read the program, those who have Yasmo Live can look on their Yasmo Live right now and check it out. But Gigi Wang, I'll let her introduce herself. Go ahead, Gigi.
How much time?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So, okay.
I'm very brutal on this.
Yeah, I'm Gigi Wang, and I, in my professional life, I do strategic international marketing and business development. And so I work with regions all around the world. In the last couple of years, I've had a very fun time of traveling all around Europe to different countries like France, Italy, Spain. I didn't make it all the way to Russia yet, but that would be really cool. And then also went to Australia and just came back from China and from Mexico. And one of the things I do is meet with the startups and the entrepreneurs and the universities there and work with them. So.
Yeah, she gets around, in other words. You also, you kind of failed to mention that you've worked with MIT Stanford.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was the past chair of the MIT Stanford Venture Lab, VLab, as many of you might know it, and I'm currently on the board. And
winner of the National Modesty Award also. So, and I mean that, because she's a very modest person, despite all the amazing things she's done. Whitney, I'm doing this the Russian way, sorry. Go ahead.
My name is Whitney Hischer, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Executive Education at the hospital business at UC Berkeley, which Gigi is a grad, and I'm a grad also. I like to joke what I do is I run a professional services firm in a communist bureaucracy. Probably doesn't totally compare to the Soviet Union, but UC Berkeley is pretty close. So what I do is a lot of customized programs for companies as well as visiting foreigners. And one of the main themes they like to learn about coming here to Silicon Valley is innovation and how it can be taught. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. And my one experience working in Russia is I used to work with NATO and do conferences there. And we actually had a conference in Moscow with the military, which was very interesting.
Now, that's interesting because that brings us together. Because when I was much younger, I was a professional interpreter for ministers and NATO. And the first time Russians ever came to NATO, the brass, military brass, I was their interpreter.
Okay.
That was a long, long time ago. It was like 25 years ago. But it was a very interesting moment. We can discuss it some other time. That's pretty funny. And now, Scott Ritchie.
Yeah, so hi, my name's Scott Ritchie. I'm one of the co-founders of Mobkite, which doesn't mean a lot. We're still in stealth mode and building it up. I was asked to come to this panel. I have an extensive background in both venture capital startups backed by big VCs, as well as raising capital for my own companies and others over the last 11 years, including a lot of strategics, NTT Docomo, Vodafone Ventures, Orange Ventures, Qualcomm Ventures, and a number of other mobile startups that I've been part of for the last 8 years. Additionally, I think one of the things is I started my career with bigger software companies, Lotus and Microsoft, and ended up setting up their operations in China about 15 years ago. And you can imagine with IP rights and so forth, that was a bit of an eye-opener, but as well as taking companies to Japan as well and setting up operations in Japan.
Was it an eye-opener and an eye-closer?
Well, one of the things was, how well are you doing in the market? Because you don't really know in consumer on the sales side. So we would go out and see how many CDs and which of those programs were being pirated on the streets to understand if we're marketing it correctly or not. It didn't come on the revenue side, that's for sure.
One of the great moments, I think, in history was when the Chinese launched their first spacecraft with an astronaut into space not too long ago, huh? Is when they did the control room thing on the television. I don't know if everybody saw this. They panned back from the control room, you know, our Houston, you know, Houston, there's a problem, blah, blah. They panned back from the control room, and it's Microsoft on all of the screens. I mean, they're running a spaceship with Microsoft network. I'm not sure I would have wanted to be the astronaut personally, but anyway. And Roman Kikta, we met at a conference which I was involved in on innovation in Europe as well. Tell a bit about yourself, because I think you've got a really nice profile for what we're talking about.
Dobre utro. I'm Roman Kikta. I'm a venture capitalist. I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience, so I want to thank you on behalf of my venture capital colleagues because you really give us purpose. My own background, I've been in the wireless industry for 28 years, actually, since its inception in the United States, and I've been very fortunate that I've been part of an industry that has really transformed society, and it is now reaching out to every woman, man, child, and thing in the world, providing connectivity. So I'm very blessed and privileged to be part of an industry that has really transformed society. I've spent several years with Nokia, helping them become a global leader, though I do know that they have some of the challenges. I've also been involved for the past decade or so running a venture capital fund, working with entrepreneurs such as yourselves, helping bring ideas to life. And we work with entrepreneurs from a concept stage. And some of these concepts have turned into very large companies. My belief is that a strong entrepreneurial community and a strong venture capital community equates to a very strong and healthy economy.
And that's, yeah, sorry.
Because it's these new innovative companies that are creating jobs, and not only in the United States, but really all over the world.
All right, I think that's a great lead-in. And in fact, the best lead-in we had was from our Ukrainian colleague, talking about a region that many of the people here in the Valley would do well to know better, which is sort of going northeast from Germany and out into eastern, what was then Eastern Europe. You find incredible regions or pockets of innovation. What's the difference between a small group of innovative companies and a huge economy of innovative companies like we heard about in Ukraine outsourcing and IT industry? What makes that happen? And I think that's one of the themes we want to do. And we're going to do a little work with you a bit later to talk about what constitutes an ideal framework for an innovation region or hub. But the first thing I wanted to ask just each panelist in turn, just briefly say a region of innovation that you've been involved with personally, and just give us a few bullet points on what you observed there, or what surprised you, or what was different to what we know here in Silicon Valley or in the United States in general. I don't know. Maybe we could start with you, Gigi, because you've been in, you've been sort of the bee buzzing from innovation center to innovation center even more than some of the others here.
Well, I'm sure, I think the number one, after traveling around so much, I think the number one innovation center is Silicon Valley. And there's a whole bunch of reasons which I think we'll discuss in the panel why it's one of the top innovation centers. But I'm actually going to be a little bit contrarian. And I am actually going to talk about an experience I had in an area, and I'm going to be controversial, which has been trying very hard to be innovative, but hasn't really quite done it, okay? And that is Singapore, okay? So,
Singapore, huh?
Yeah, as many of you know, Singapore is a very wealthy country. They've put a lot of funds in it, yet...
Just to make clear one thing, anyone from Singapore in the room? Okay, continue.
How many people have been to Singapore? Okay, it's in some ways it's like the Switzerland of Asia, and it's very well run. The country has one of the highest per capita per person, yet and they've been trying so hard to be innovative. The country has a lot of investment funds for startups. They have a lot of programs, yet they still have not produced any superstars.
And it's true, I've noticed also that they've been very aggressive in going out and publicizing that effort.
But,
more so than many places, notably Ukraine.
Right.
But I think they've really been very aggressive.
Exactly. I mean, there's two companies which have actually been very successful out of Singapore. One is Creative, remember Sound Blaster? And then the other one is Interwoven, is kind of a e-commerce middleware thing. But the interesting thing is both those companies were not supported by the government because both the founders were not high-performing scholars.
Yeah,
so the government didn't help them. So it's very interesting that the government programs that did not help the two successful. But I want to actually share with you one experience I had there and kind of point out things which lead to, it's a way to identify what are the issues with, what are the issues that might be hampering some regions that wish to be innovation centers, but just they can't understand why they're not. So back in 1995, I was working in Silicon Valley with a bunch of internet startups, ISPs, so internet service providers. So this is 1995, very early years. And by some crazy circumstances, I got recruited to go to Singapore and start the second ISP. The first internet service provider was Singtel, which is a government carrier. And I got recruited to start the second one in Singapore. And I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I'm Chinese, they're Chinese, we're all going to get along. And
oops.
One of the things I've learned is Chinese from every single region are different. So a Chinese from Shanghai, from Taiwan, from Singapore, from Hong Kong, they're different culturally. So be aware. And so I landed there, and I was very excited because to me, that 1995, the internet was changing the world. You could find people, you could do things. I mean, I was so excited. And so, like, a couple of things is like when I put together the team to do it, a lot of my team was saying to me, okay, here, let's come up with some strategies. Let's come up with strategies to go steal all the Singtel customers. Keep in mind, Singtel only had like 30,000 customers in a country of 3 million. And I'm saying, wait, there's almost 3 million other people to go after. Why do we want to go after them? And a lot of the attitude is this competitive, want to beat up your competitor rather than really grow the market.
So you're saying there's a kind of envy factor. You think you see that as an obstacle?
Yeah. Well, and I'll kind of bring this at the end, talk about why it is. But so I want to kind of just tell you some things that, just really quick points about this, and then I'll kind of summarize it with some points. Is one of the things that we found out that in terms of being innovative, we found out how Singtel sold their services was they would go to a customer and say, order a fax line, order a telephone line, order an internet line. They didn't present the internet to what it could be. They're just another telephone line. So after a year, only 10,000 people had signed up, which the government was really scared because Malaysia had 100,000 people signed up. So they were very competitive. And so one of the things we did when we launched the service is we positioned it as much more innovative, much more creative. We positioned it as, in our advertising campaign, I like Pacific Internet because I can see pictures the government won't let me see because of all the censorship, right?
That leaves it pretty open in Singapore. I mean, that's a lot of work for Kuznets.
But I like Pacific Internet because I can get better grades than my other students because I can get more information for my reports. Or I like Pacific Internet because my lover is only a few strokes of the keyboard away. So we really positioned it really creatively, and I was shocked because no one ever competes with a carrier and beats them. But in 6 months, we beat Singtel. So that was, bringing that new approach and positioning things different, being innovative makes a difference. And Another thing that was very important was empowering. Like, I was working 20-hour days, and I was exhausted, and I really couldn't do more. But yet, when I first started, I insisted that all my employees have everything, all the programs approved by me before they continued forward. And then finally, I couldn't do it. I didn't have the time. So they just went off and did it by themselves. And the next thing I knew, our sales tripled because they went and did programs and didn't need my approval.
You're really talking about culture.
Culture.
I mean, you're really talking about culture and the way people perceive the difference in approach. And you said that Singapore and then all the regions of China are a lot different than maybe even you expected.
Yeah, exactly.
When you come back now and look at that from far away, and you think of Singapore, you say, well, is it a region for innovation? They've tried very hard and they haven't succeeded. Is culture the factor?
Culture, I think at the end of the day, we can identify things like VCs, things like good universities, things like ecosystems. That's really obvious, okay? And so, like, for example, Singapore has implemented lots of VCs, lots of ecosystems programs to help the entrepreneurs. 2 top universities, NUS and NTU, yet they still haven't produced it. So I'm going to kind of summarize right now with what I think are 4 points of culture that Silicon Valley really has, and for people to think about it when you're trying to build innovation in your regions. And one of them is openness, openness about sharing stuff. Like, I actually taught entrepreneurship at the University of Singapore as an adjunct professor, and a lot of the students, when they showed me their business plan, the first thing they would say is, Gigi, how do I hide it so no one steals it? I'm like, you
still get that. I mean, you get that here,
stealing?
too.
But do you see the attitude? Is no, you have to be open so you can learn more and find out what's wrong with your plan, how you can make it better. And then another thing was actually collaboration. Is if you see Silicon Valley, there is so much collaboration. And there is, people work together. There's a huge problem. Yet, when you put 10 minds together, you have a much higher collective IQ. And one of the things that we actually ended up doing in Singapore is because we didn't have that much bandwidth from the US, which was what was needed then, we actually partnered with Singtel. And we brought in a huge pipe, which just made Singapore much, much stronger and enabled as an IT country.
That was co-opetition.
Exactly. And then the third thing is integrity. And then everyone thinks of integrity as not pirating, things like that. Singapore, when it comes to pirating and corruption, it has one of the lowest levels of corruption, and it's considered very high integrity. But there's another level of integrity that I think is really important, and it's relationship integrity. And what I mean is that relationship integrity is trying to make sure it's a win-win for everybody. Like, when we work with people in Silicon Valley, we often say, oh, can you help me? And then, how can I help you? So we always look for a win-win situation rather than, this is what you can do for me, okay? And then the very last point I want to make is something that kind of crystallized in my mind this summer after traveling with Europe, is the concept of jealousy, okay? And relative amounts of jealousy. In Silicon Valley, there is a surprisingly low level of jealousy. So when someone's friend does well, a person's really happy, and they try to help them, okay? And so what people do in Silicon Valley is a friend does well, they're happy, the friend pulls you up, and everyone pulls each other up. So everyone pulls each other up, because you don't get jealous. Because what happens is in several regions and numerous countries in Europe, people there in Italy and Spain and France were telling me, jealousy is a really bad thing in our culture, because when someone does well, the people around them aren't happy, so they start saying negative things. They don't want to help that person, so they want to keep everyone down, okay?
In the sort of workshop part. But I think that's a very good thing to end on there, because this whole thing of, the old joke, in fact, when I was working in Russia, I remember one of my Russian friends told me a joke about, he had done very well with a company, very, very well, and he told me that the people who knew he'd done well, the joke was, I have a cow, he has a cow. I have a cow, he has a second cow. I have a cow, he has 3 cows. So I went to pray to God, and I went to, pray that I would do better, I said. No, he said. I prayed that his cows would die. So I think the attitude that exemplifies it's not just Russian, by the way. I mean, in France, if you get a nice car here, right? Everybody in the streets say nice ride. Even people who are totally socioeconomically different to you, they'll say nice ride. If you get that car in France because you sold your company, they'll run their key along the door. So you have to be careful with what you think, what you perceive as the local culture, and sharing without jealousy is probably one of the keys. I want to ask Roman to talk to us a little bit, because I think having worked both in Nokia for a long time, I mean, you were there over 10 years, I think, and close to the highest points of Nokia, and now in Texas, where you run a venture capital business, and also we tend to ignore the fact that Texas is probably, I think, the second most venture capital driven state in the country after California, right?
Sure.
So it would be nice to hear from you on those 2 regions in particular.
So
what characterizes their culture of innovation?
Let me talk a little bit about Finland, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Finland.
How many of you are familiar with Finland?
I think you're
Yeah,
you
you told me,
name.
yeah,
Right.
there's a Finnish guy in there, I think, yeah. Well, all the Russians are familiar with Finland being just next door. It was formerly a part of Russia, in fact. Yeah, there were a couple of those.
So if we look at Finland, Finland is an innovation nation. We know it to be high-tech, driven by Nokia and so on. But when I joined Nokia, and I was the second person in their PCS group, and actually like the 40th person in the Americas, Finland was not the leader it is today, nor was Nokia. But I saw one company actually transform a nation.
Yeah, can I just a moment? I think that's a really fundamental point, is that one company can transform a situation, or one person who sticks out and really coagulates. And Nokia really played that role, is what you're saying.
It did. So Finland, a country of about 5 million, geographically the size of California, so it's fairly large. Primarily known for its wood and forestry products.
Yeah, very agricultural, really.
Agricultural, and all of a sudden it becomes a high-tech innovation center. How did that happen? Well, it happened for a couple of reasons. One, in the early 90s, Nokia knew that, and Nokia was a very diversified conglomerate. They made tires, they made wood products, they made cell phones, they made TVs, they made a lot of different products. But they were not known for any product specifically. The company decided to focus on telecom, on wireless specifically. And within that, an entire ecosystem grew up. Education, the government also put in a lot of efforts into making sure that the universities and in places like Oulu, which is about 100 miles south of the Arctic Circle, it's a place, frankly, in the middle of nowhere, became the Technopolis Center, the high-tech center for Finland. You had a great university system. The MIT, for instance, of Finland was situated there. And everything starts off with education. So the universities are turning out bright students, and as the wireless industry is growing, a lot of these companies are now supplying products and services to Nokia. And as Nokia becomes a global leader, it in turn is raising the entire economy of the country.
Through the suppliers?
Through the suppliers, through that entire
the R&D
ecosystem.
that they
through
were
the
doing at the
R&D
university.
and so on. And so that becomes very important, is to be able to, one, have an educational system that establishes the foundation for that growth, and then having you know, an entire ecosystem that is very focused on an industry. And it turned Nokia into a global leader. So it was that focus, the educational system that helped propel the rise of Finland. The other thing too is the government put together programs that would help create innovation. They would invest in startup companies because at the end of the day, it's all about economic growth. And the Finnish government was very proactive in that regard, and still is to this day.
I mean, but you can say, I mean, I thought the comment here was that whole thing about, hi, we're from the government and we're here to help you. That's like the end of a company for me, quite often. So you have to be careful about how the government intervenes. I think what the Finns did that was so brilliant was they coupled education, innovative companies, and big companies. And in fact, the French tried to do the same thing. They haven't quite succeeded. They did these competition centers or skills centers around 7 major poles of innovation. But they was very focused on the large companies getting new blood, as opposed to the Finnish concept, which was help younger people participate in the whole chain of value. I think this help younger people participate in the whole chain of value was something that I saw in Finland as well that I thought was great.
Absolutely, and you know the whole mindset of the country turned from from the forestry and agricultural products into high tech,
and now green tech and clean tech,
and clean tech and so on. I can tell you this: the time period that we're living in now is the most exciting time to be alive. There is more innovation happening today than there have been probably for the past 4,000 or 5,000 years. In the past 100 years, has really been the golden age of innovation. And a lot of it has been driven by people like you, people who are willing to take the risk, that are innovative, that are creative, and want to make a difference. And if we look at the DNA of any great company, startup company, it is started by people with ideas.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting that has happened. When I work on these topics with boardrooms, what I do is I talk about the difference between inspiration, invention, and innovation, right? Was Leonardo da Vinci an innovator? You all do know who Leonardo da Vinci was, right? Was he an innovator? Or an inventor? I mean, for me, an innovator is somebody who brings something to the market and creates value for more than himself or his patron or her patron, right? And I think if you look at his life, he died a poor guy living in the French king's house in an out-of-the-way town, right? He did amazing things. And if he had been able to realize his tank or his helicopter, he would have changed the course of history. We'd all be speaking Italian now, right? But the fact is, an innovator needs other people. Yes. And those people have to share culture, and they have to be not jealous. If you look at invention, inspiration comes from where? What does vento mean? Or inspir in Russian. Vzdychать. It comes from the divine. It comes from the wind, the divine wind in Japanese, right? It's something that it's not human. Inspiration, invention come from beyond us. But innovation is around ovo, it's around the egg. It's an organic human-animal process. That's a huge step change, and that only happened, that idea only took place about 200 years ago when math and marginal values started to come in. What is more valuable than another thing was also a new concept in the 18th century, comparing things according to their value. So I think, when you talk about the Finns, they have understood that it's an organic process and that you have to feed it, you have to fertilize it, you have to grow it. Here, it's almost, in Silicon Valley, I would say sometimes it's almost like this amazing chance encounter of all those factors at once. But let's talk about, I just want to ask Whitney if you could talk about education, because what do you guys think? Can you teach innovation? Can you teach people to answer you when you ask a question? Can you teach innovation? What about all that openness she was just talking about? What happened? Can you teach innovation? Yes, thank you. Yeah, there's somebody with a voice. What has been your experience? I know you just came back from Mongolia, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I did. I'm actually helping to set up an executive education center in Mongolia, and I can talk specifically about that. But I think we brought up a bunch of good themes, and for me, I get clients coming to us all the time, either from very stodgy old world companies, big oil companies, big mining companies, teach us to be innovative. And I think there's a piece of just feeling like coming to Silicon Valley, they can learn it by osmosis. I think fundamentally innovation means human capital, and human capital is about constant development. It's not a one-shot process, and that's what education is all about. I think there are cultures that do it well, and there are ones that are open to taking risks. There's not a lot of fear involved, and you see this translate into company cultures as well. I work with a big pharma company that has huge trust problems and a lot of micromanagement, which basically squelches innovation. No one wants to make a mistake, and everything is incredibly data-driven and not a lot of experimentation. Sorry about this.
I don't know if I think it's me, actually. That's
okay. So let me talk about Mongolia, just because it's kind of an interesting place, and for those from Russia, obviously it's got...
You've all been to Mongolia, right?
Has anyone been to Ulaanbaatar? All right. So it's wedged between two superpowers, Russia and China, long and antagonistic history with both, although less so with Russia.
In fact, it used to rule both of them.
Exactly, and it used to rule most of Asia. I'd say that the thing that I'm excited about and the reason we're there, well, first of all, it's been fairly public. There's a big mining boom going on and potentially one of the world's largest gold and copper mine finds in the south. There is zero infrastructure there to support it. Everything from roads to power to water are gone. I mean, they just don't exist. And there's a big human capital problem. It's a small country. It's got 3 million people, half of which live in the city, and the rest are nomadic. There's a high literacy rate, but there's actually not a lot of education around mining per se.
Surprise, yeah.
Yeah. So they're going through a process that I think Russia's experienced, which they call the repat. So a lot of very well-educated Mongolians who often were shipped off to the US, Australia, Europe as high schoolers are returning now to be CEOs, and at a very young age. So similar to Russia, you meet a lot of CEOs in their early 30s. Someone described to me that Mongolians are a bit like everyone thinks they're a mini Genghis Khan. And there is
everybody, each individual thinks they're a mini Genghis Khan?
So
sounds like my mother-in-law.
A spirit of fearlessness, there's a spirit of entrepreneurialism, of making do, because they had quite a long, more socialist, communist history, and very tight networks. Everyone knows each other. I work quite a bit in Norway, and a lot of similarities with the size of the population and the networks. So back to innovation and human capital, really I see that the connection there, and when it works well, is about networks. Not just having them. We talk a lot about networks in the context of university environments and academic research, but it's how you build them and what you do with them. And I think one of the things that I see happening in Mongolia, which hopefully will mean their long-term effectiveness, is that they have tight networks, they have a small business community that has a lot of international connections to bring in outside expertise and capital at this point. And there's a real keen desire to continue building around education. So they have a high literacy rate, but they also know that most of their education was developed during Soviet times and is very much lecture-driven and not experimental and not hands-on.
This is a really important point, I think. The idea that you can teach people to be innovative with lectures as opposed to experience still is alive out there. I don't know if you've observed it in your own school systems, but I've seen it in European school systems where they lecture people on how to be innovative.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Because innovation is really about self-actualization as well, right?
Absolutely. So I guess let me just transition into how we teach innovation or attempt to, and make a lot of money at least helping companies try to be more innovative and build innovation pockets around the world. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and I think you can apply this to kind of your own mindset and life. So obviously there's a larger infrastructure and ecosystem, and yes, it's good to have that in place, but you can't always depend on it. And a lot of the work that folks here do is helping build out that infrastructure. There's a human capital side, so there's just the having access to the right talent and the right mindset and knowing what you need. And the mindset is a key thing. We teach this to our MBAs now because we realize they're very risk averse. So we teach a whole course around experimentation.
Yeah, actually, I mean, is that something people have noticed? I mean, everybody here is sort of, there's some quite young people here I know, but from my point of view, having spent 20 years doing this stuff like some of the people out there, have you noticed that the younger group is becoming more and more risk averse? Like testing, not here in Silicon Valley, but outside Silicon Valley. I mean, it seems to me that there is a kind of slowing down, and I think it's something we have to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, but I think there's sometimes an over-reliance on technology, both in terms of communication, so a loss of face-to-face communication skills, but then a laziness that you can push a button and a report prints. So you have all the data, but there's a lack of going to the next step of like, well, what makes sense? What could I do differently with it? So back to how we teach this. It's an interactive environment. There's no lecture. A lot of it gets away from death by PowerPoint and is really the leveraging the audience in discussion. We have quite a few projects where we bring in academics, and I'm not sure if you've done this as well, Roman, serving as an expert, basically to help guide a group on their business plan or looking at going into new markets. So really bridging more around entrepreneurs and academia, because despite the theoretical past of what we've taught, now we're really trying to be much more practical and hands-on. And I think the final piece is building these mentorship networks. I previously worked with the Endeavor Initiative and did a lot of work in Latin America helping entrepreneurs. And one of the biggest challenges there was they just had nobody to look up to. It was a lot of self-taught business practices and family-run businesses. So we connected them often back to Latin expat, well-to-do bankers, often in New York, that had the capital, they had the connections, and they had the experience to help them. So again, back to the human capital theme, it's who can help you, what do you know, and how do you keep improving yourself and seeing life as a constant process of reinvention.
I think there are a couple of themes that have come out that I want you to keep in mind. One obviously is culture, openness. Another one is human capital and education, which is kind of, you guys both touched on. There's another theme. I just want to ask in this room, how many of you have actually mentored another company? Hello? How many of you actually mentored? Well, obviously, yes. Could you share just a little bit about that experience? Do you feel like up to it just to share? I mean, how many companies have you mentored? And what type of structure did you use to do that? I mean, later we're going to ask you. If you could think about it, we'll ask you later to share. Is that okay? Okay. And how many of you others out there are mentoring a company right now? Anybody? Yeah? Well, just think about it, because we're going to ask a question later about mentoring. The other thing I thought was interesting was, how many of you came from far away to this conference? Far away. I mean, you had to get on a plane. And how many of you are living, okay, that's a lot. So what was the key reason that you came to Silicon Valley in your mind? What was the key reason? To this conference or in general? Anybody out there? To learn about venture capital. What else? To gain new experience. Because of the level of technology. So finding building blocks for what you're doing. Anybody else? Anyone else? Those were great comments. Thanks. Oh, there, yeah. Networking. Yeah, okay. So we're kind of on track. And the reason I asked that question there is because I wanted Scott, I think there's another theme, which is the outsider coming in. One of the really important things about Silicon Valley, and I think all regions, you talked about in Singapore as being maybe a weakness, the outsider coming in. How is that outsider welcomed? How is that outsider who's bringing great information, great new practices to a region or to a group, how are they managed? Who can we think of who was an outsider who changed the world? Huh? Well, Skype, yeah, they're an outsider. They were an outsider in an insider business, in the telco business. What about Marie Curie, right? Polish immigrant in France. Can you give other examples, anybody?
And Mayoshi-san.
Mayoshi-san. Who else? Tesla. Sorry? Tesla. Who else? I mean, there are lots. If you look at the history of innovations that changed the world, a lot of them are outsiders coming into a culture, contributing, benchmarking against their own culture, and saying, hey, there's a space to innovate here. And I thought, Scott, you had a lot of experiences with different cultures. Do you feel that that's accurate, that there's a value to that?
I do. So I will take the side of Gigi, which I think one thing that just seems to work here is culture. I mean, my last company that I co-founded as an entrepreneur, you know, I had two Pakistani co-founders and one Indian co-founder, and when we were in the venture capital circuit, You know, the first thing an American Chinese who is running a fund says, and you know, this is weird. I mean, you guys, you Pakistanis and Indians, you come here and get along, you should be killing each other. If I threw you back in your countries, what's going to happen? So, you know, my current company, I have a Russian partner, born in Russia, educated in Russia, and did his master's in the United States, and as well as, you know, born in India and did their computer science PhDs here. So India, Russia, and you know, my background is I was born in Taiwan and kind of moved all over Asia as a kid up till 18, till I went to college here in the United States. So that mix you don't get. You know, I've dealt with a lot of companies being on the strategic investment side for Compaq for a number of years in China, which they only assimilate with certain Chinese in certain areas. And outside of that, you don't have this mix and perspective you're going to get, because it's really hard for them to deal with Indians, and it's really hard to deal with them with other people as well. So this is very unique, I think, about Silicon Valley. And I think part of it is because, you know, we're kind of all immigrants. Going back to how many of these companies and the technology were co-founded by Intel. I mean, we could go on and on. Google. Yahoo with Jerry Yang. So, so this part is unique, and I don't know if this is replicable. You know, Singapore's obviously tried it, but this is very difficult to do.
I think that's I think it's one of the key things for me. I think that's one of the key things where, in the U.S. in general, because of the immigrant status maybe that we all are, there's this openness to the new ideas coming in that is relatively rare in other places. And I think it's a condition sine qua non for success, really, don't you? One last thing we'll touch on with the panel before we go to you, because you guys are going to do some work now. I just thought it'd be worthwhile just talking briefly about each person's view on an infrastructure, a piece of infrastructure. What do you think is the infrastructure for a region of innovation? The key points of infrastructure. I'm not talking about buildings. Let's assume that we're not in the Mongolian example, which is a tough one. But what are the key checkpoints for infrastructure?
Intellectual property protection.
All right, so that was one that you wanted to speak on, and we will. The concentration of experienced people. What else? Hello? What's this? Universities, yes. Well, I think that, you know, intellectually qualified people. What else? Capital. If you take Russia, for example, how much of Russia's accessible capital is concentrated in Moscow in percent terms? Anybody know? 80%. It's 80%. So that's a big challenge for Novosibirsk, for St. Petersburg even, where about 10 of the other 20% is, right? It's between 70 and 80, but I think, you know, it's closer to 80 now. So here, you know, that's a big piece of infrastructure, the access to capital, the legal infrastructure, and particularly IP protection. What else is there? What else is important? I thought you guys were engineers. Some of you, anyway. Huh? Government support. Well, it can be very important. Yeah. If you look back, how many of you know cluster theory? Anything? John Porter? You know, nothing? No? Hello? A hot dog? Anybody? Cluster theory, I mean, if you take cluster theory from the 90s, basically what you're looking at is a cataloging of successful hubs of innovation. And by the way, Silicon Valley was right up there already. But there are a number of things that were done in the 90s, like the biotech development in North Carolina. Nobody thought it would succeed, but it did. Why? Because they looked at infrastructure first. They put down the IP, the legal, et cetera. So think about those themes, because we're going to come back to them. And I just wanted each of you to give a comment on a piece of infrastructure. The one that most maybe closest to you might be financial, right? What's your view on that?
So, you know, one thing that makes Silicon Valley very unique, you know, from any other place in the world, is that you have, this is the hub for capital, for venture capital. You go to places like Sand Hill Road, and there's hundreds of venture capital firms here. And so you have ready access. But let's take a look. I'm from Dallas, Texas. And Dallas, Texas, I don't know if you know about Texas. Texas
Made a little money in oil down there, I remember.
Texas is the energy state of the United States of America. We have gas, oil, and it's a culture of risk takers. Because when you're going and drilling for oil wells, you'll drill hundreds of wells, and some of them are dry. There is no oil coming up. So it's a culture of risk takers. We call them the wirecatters mentality. But it's that culture of risk taking that actually goes across all of society, all the way through the government. The government of Texas has set up an entrepreneurial emerging tech fund. And they are actually working alongside of venture capital firms and private equity firms and seeding some of these new innovative companies. Texas, you know, in addition to being an energy state, is also sometimes referred to as on prairie, because we have our share of, you know, silicon companies, foundries, and so on.
The wireless industry.
And also the wireless industry. Dallas is the wireless capital of the world. We have 9 out of the 10 largest telecom companies situated for their either U.S. or America's headquarters in the, you know, in the Dallas region. And within those companies, you have an entire ecosystem of companies that are supporting all of these giants.
Is it a strategy? I mean, because it comes...
The reason being is that it becomes a model of inspiration. And I'll tell you, what's really unique about Silicon Valley, and I think both Gigi and Whitney have talked about, is this openness of culture. You know, I go to a lot of networking events, and what I'm really surprised to see is that you have some of the leading innovators, and these are multi-billionaires that are in the audience, and they're collaborating. They're networking with people. They're still hungry and passionate to get new ideas. And I really think that, as I think Gigi, you pointed out, you know, it raises up the bar and everybody sort of gets elevated. So I think that's really important. But if you have an anchor, just like I talked about Finland with Nokia being that anchor that helped an entire nation rise, I think having that model of inspiration, I think it's key.
Gigi, what's the piece of infrastructure that you found the most important in the regions that you see as successful?
Okay, so one region that I found in the last year, which I was very excited about, which it felt like Silicon Valley, was southern Sweden. So how many of you know of Malmö and Lund University in southern Sweden? So that area, I went there for a startup camp and helped to mentor, and it had, the infrastructure it had was a real strong support for international networking. And so the government organizations and several other organizations like the Nordic Games Group kept holding conferences and bringing people
Just
to
get
mentor
those
them.
outside people in, right?
Yeah, so they provided access to human capital, and they provided these wonderful sessions where we worked with the entrepreneurs and mentored them, and then we also partied with them. That's where you really build the good bonds.
That's where it really starts.
And as a result, this region in the last 2 years has made some major acquisitions. So for example, one of their companies that came from this region, Polar Rose, was acquired by Apple. So how can this company in this kind of remote region in Sweden get acquired by Apple? Because they had, you know, the culture for success, and they had, very importantly, the infrastructure piece of international networking with human capital.
And getting noticed is a big piece of the puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. Getting noticed is a big piece of the puzzle. I don't know, I just think of like the Black Swan, you know, when he talks about all those people who've been great authors that we've never read because they didn't get noticed. If you think of Harry Potter, she submitted that to 11 publishers before it was accepted, right? So there were 11 suicides in London a few years later. But it's like the publisher that bought it obviously made billions, right? Billions. and that is a very nice sequitur to intellectual property. Scott, you were saying with Microsoft in China a few issues with intellectual property. How important is it to infrastructure for you?
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you look at the Chinese firms that are succeeding right now, I mean, they're succeeding because they have a big consumer market, right? I mean, if you look at Weibo and Sina and those content sites, but is there any intellectual property in that? Probably not. I mean, you know, if you look at Asia right now, Japan, according to Thomson Reuters, who does these, who analyzes the Derwent patent index, indicated Japan is #2 in the world in terms of intellectual property, if you would, but measured by patents, therefore corporate innovation. But you know, when's the last Japanese startup that's been around the world to take over? I mean, it's probably SoftBank, which was created in 1981 by a Korean in Japan. So innovation's one side, and you look at the startups are one side. And then if you look at startups and patents and intellectual property, these are key, I think, areas that a lot of countries don't protect. And because they don't protect this, you don't see them creating it. And you know, in the World Index, we talk about all the technology companies setting up in China and India and software. In that World Index of the 100 most innovative companies based on patents, China has 0, right? India has 0. So people are going to go where their creation can be protected, where it can be shared. I mean, if you look at Silicon Valley, if you create something out of the universities typically will let the inventor or inventors take it and create a company out of it and co-own the patents. Does that work with a big Chinese firm? Absolutely not. So those are one of the keys.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. And I guess education is not last but least. It's almost last but most important in a way, because it starts very early.
Yeah, you know, maybe I have a somewhat controversial view on this, but I think that education, simply for the sake of education, like the Saudis did and the Egyptians, is a huge, huge bomb waiting to go off. You know, there's a lot of attribution to the uprising in Egypt being a lot of unemployed, well-educated young men, and the government paid for them to get degrees they could never use. So I don't think universities should exist simply for the sake of existing. They need to exist as hubs for ideas to be exchanged and to create new things. And if they don't, if it's simply to churn people through, give them a piece of paper that frankly means nothing in an increasingly entrepreneurial world that everyone has degrees and you can get them online, you need to be able to do something with what you have when you're there. And that really comes down to the networks you establish, both with the academic side and with your colleagues. If you don't go for that, then there's no point. Certainly earlier education and just basic literacy is key, and there's a socialization aspect. But I think particularly in Europe, we've overeducated people.
Yeah.
Often, like look at, you know, Holland, you'll have people in undergrad till their 30s because it's free, why not? But they get out with not a whole lot of useful skills to contribute. I'd love your take on that too, since you work on the academic side.
I would say one thing that's very important, education is the most important thing. However, let's not wait till we get to a university.
Yeah, right.
I really
That's
believe,
I believe that too, yeah.
this should be taught in elementary school.
Elementary school, yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, because
Roman, you know, when I had my kids were, for a while, we were living in Europe, and when they went, it was in a French school. When they wanted to do a trip with the whole class, wanted to do a trip. Of course, I'm being American, they didn't have enough budget. So I said, well, do a car wash, you know? Wash cars, get the money, pay the trip, contribute, learn about business. I almost went to jail. Like the teachers got upset and, you know, called me into the school. You know, you're trying to make children work. What the hell is this? And, you know, it was like, well, maybe prepare them for the real world, you know, where you do have to work to do what you want to do. So, I mean, I think it's really got to start early. It's got to be, like, part of the reality. I mean, it is part of reality.
Oh, absolutely. I'll share with you a very quick story. I have 2 kids. I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. And we live on a golf course, and a lot of bad golfers will hit the balls into our
that's where
yard.
my balls are.
But my kids have collected up all of the golf balls, and they start selling back the golf balls
I did that
to
as
the
a kid
people,
too.
to the golfers. And, you know, they sell it for, depending on the ball, if it's a Titleist Pro V4 or 5 or whatever it is, they command a premium. They go, that ball costs you $2, this is $1, and so on. So they've realized that, hey, we can make money. And, you know, I share this with you is that you could never be too young to start thinking entrepreneurially.
Just make sure they're not getting them directly out of the golf bags, will you?
Yes.
Because that's not a lost ball. But no, I think so. We've covered a bunch of themes, and now you guys are going to do some work. Aha! You didn't expect this. If you're at a table where there's 2 people or less, you have to move to another table. You have to constitute a table of 4 to do this exercise. Okay? You guys ready to do this? A few of you falling asleep, but I think it's because you had a good time last night. So if you're at a table of 2 or less, move to another table so you can be 4. You should find on your table. Yeah, we gotta hook that up. Some pages. The first thing you're gonna do. This is a silent exercise, so you don't have to talk during this exercise, and I'm not going to be talking either. Kuznets, you guys have to break up over there. It's gonna be a monolithic thinking, so you gotta sort of mix into another table. What we're going to do here is we're going to do a little process where you're going to help us characterize on a few themes that we've just discussed how to make an ideal innovation region. Okay? It's just a thought process. You're not going to be tested. Okay? One of the first things we'll do is we're going to practice this. That's why I called it a workshop panel. One of the things you probably know, and we've just gone through it in a very quick way, going over these different themes. These are not the themes, okay? Don't rush to a conclusion. But in every innovation or breakthrough value creation, what I call breakthrough value creation, and other people call it that, you basically have a situation where you gather information or make observations. These can be questions, problems, challenges, I like to call them. Then you have a period of where that takes place, an incubation takes place. Like you're walking down the street and you see a handicapped person trying to get out of a car in a parking space, and you realize that if they're able to get out of the car, they'll get hit by the car that's passing, right? So you think about that, you incubate, and you make a wider parking space, for example. Okay, I'm simplifying. But you process that, you explore the options. Then you get to a period where you're in the illumination phase, and that usually takes place in a group. We don't like to admit this, but the best new ideas are ones we copied from other people, right? So I say copy with pride, but legally. If you see people doing something you think you can do better, copying them is not copying them, it's taking what they're doing and making it better, right, yourself. I'm not talking about illegal operations, but it takes place in a group, in an exchange, the illumination. And then you have a thing called validation. This is when you're getting closer and closer to the market. Each step is getting closer to the market. And that validation process is very specifically tied to infrastructure, for example. You have to have a lab, you have to have a team, you have to have testing and rethinking capacity to validate. It's only after validation that you actually are on a path to an innovation, because an innovation that doesn't work is called what? Yeah, that's what it's called, exactly. Nothing. So I just want to put that in your head as you think about the themes we're going to work on. How are we going to work? We're going to do something I call, it's an idea production exercise. And we're going to do something called brainographics. Trademark, protected. No, actually, I just put that up there. But the idea is, in the brainographic, what you're going to do is you're going to take a theme, and 3 tables are going to have a theme. Well, how many tables do we have? Can somebody count those up? I can't really see from here. Those guys, the single table guys, you're excluded if you don't want to join a table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. These guys, 2 at a table, you're excluded unless you join another table. So we've got 12 or 13 tables. So we'll say 3 table by 3 table. We'll get 4 themes. Do you see what I'm saying? Is everybody following me? So if we take 3 tables, they're going to work on 1 theme. We haven't chosen the themes yet, right? 3 tables are going to work on 1 theme. The way this works is we choose the theme, which we've kind of looked at already, right? The different themes. And the goal is to have original ideas about the theme in relation to an ideal innovation region. That's sort of like a Russian doll, isn't it? The goal is to have an original idea on a piece of paper about a theme that is connected to building an ideal innovation region. And then we're going to select the best ideas from each theme. And we're going to talk about that. That's going to be sort of the end of the workshop portion. Has everybody followed up to there? Is that good? Somebody who's a native speaker, tell me that I explained that well. Middle, he says. Okay. I go back through. So you're going to produce on a given theme. The cellar is always flooded. Always flooded. So I do a brain graphics, and the point of the brain graphics is to get new ideas, not your own ideas, but the ideas of everyone around the table. So I sit in a circle, and I write solutions to flooding. That's my theme. I have my kids, my wife, my neighbor, my plumber maybe, a specialist, right? And each person writes their first idea. So my first idea was make a swimming pool. Make a swimming pool. Basement's flooded, make an indoor pool. You know, it's a perfect solution. You don't have to do anything, right? Second solution, my wife, cement the basement, sell the house. That way the buyer won't see that it floods, right? You go around the corner with that, you go around the table, and you get all these new ideas. And these ideas are not the solution, they're the spark that will create the solution, right? If you go around a couple times, if you got 6 people there and you go around twice, how many ideas do you have? Engineers, right? 6 people, send the paper around, each person writes one idea, sends it to the next person, writes an idea, right? 36, right, good. All right, so, and it doesn't take a long time. That's the great thing about this. So, what you're going to do now is each one of you is going to write an idea, a very short idea. This is about brain sparking. It's not about elaborating. Just a bullet point. So if I were writing on infrastructure, I would say, make sure you have qualified patent lawyers. It's a simple idea. It's not an exaggerated idea. But you can go as far as you want. Make sure every child at the age of 5 knows what a patent is. That's also a good one. Okay? Do you understand the process? We nod here. In this country, we nod when we understand. All right? Do you understand the process? It's a quiet process. Basically, what you're going to do is a quiet brainstorming around your table. So you write your first idea, very short, pass it to the next person, pass it, pass it, pass it, pass it. All right, begins. Right? So what you just did was you had some observations. You did some incubation. Then you had an illumination as a group, because there are a lot of ideas. That's illumination. Now what are we going to do? Validation, yeah, testing. And what do you do to do that? Well, you look at the most, you know the famous story of the guy in the Royal Air Force who, when the planes came back from fighting in the dog fights, most of the staff, the technical staff said, look at all those bullet holes on that plane. That's where they get shot the most. We should reinforce those places. You know this story? What was the right thing to do? Reinforce the other places, because those are the planes that didn't come back, right? So if you get shot here and you come back, good design, good engineering. The planes that didn't come back got shot somewhere else, right? So it's a little counterintuitive. So what you got to do here in this exercise is the same thing. Look at the ideas on the page in front of you and look for the farthest from the mean. The idea that makes you say, what a stupid head, or wow, what a brilliant person, or geez, I wish I'd thought of that. That's the best way. I wish I'd thought of that. That's a good idea. And circle those ideas on that page you have in front of you. All right? Do you understand this? No. No? If you don't understand it, then I'm in trouble. So you have a page with ideas. Okay? All right. Now, you guys ready? This is going to be fun now. Give the ideas, all the pages, to one person with the circled ideas. One person gets the idea bank, okay? This is the idea bank of the table. All right, now, the people who are standing up who have the ideas, go and make a line over there at the stairs, at the podium, the stairs, okay? Yo, guys, you can move faster than that. Come on, I know, come on, Oakland Raiders, come on, let's go. All right? One person gets the ideas. Go and make a line over there. Now remember, these are the ideas that you found, a little bit wacky, a little bit out of it, kind of cool. You are the representatives of the brain graphics. We're almost done. 1 minute, 2 minutes. That's everybody? That can't be everybody. Come on, get up there. All right, now you're going to go up and you're going to say your theme and you're going to read out only the circled ideas. You guys listening to this?
Our theme was openness. We put a list of 21 ideas or so. The ones that we selected were the following. The first idea was open profile in social media and put personal interests in them.
Personal addresses on all social media addresses, all social media profiles.
Social media profiles and put interests of
Okay,
your
interests, yeah, okay.
interests. Then form clubs based on ideas and interests.
Okay, this is, again, we're talking about an ideal innovation region, right?
Create a TV live show on describing what is openness.
Okay, create a TV live show. See, I like that one. That's a good one. That's very concrete, see?
Organize webinars with scientific societies.
Organize webinars with scientific societies.
Publish results in business, technical journals and magazines.
Make sure that you get seen, right? Publish results.
And a couple more is implement technologies that enable and support sharing.
Okay.
And the last one, organize trips to other areas to exchange ideas and experiences.
Okay, so those are the ideas of that table on that theme. So you see how the process works now. Those ideas were fairly generalist, but they're a good start. If you do this process a number of times, you get more hairy, woolly, interesting, wild ideas. Next, just keep going.
Our topic was education, and the ideas are the following. It is organize events on computer where students can meet employer and interact in real time while studying in school. Okay, so another idea.
For school children, right?
Okay.
Let me
It
see if I
is
can-
improve exchange of students
can you help
process
with the
between universities
microphone?
of different countries, regions.
There you go. Thanks.
Allow universities to found new ventures with students and PhDs. Okay, open universities to society through online interview via video and other resources, so this will lead to success. I would connect corporations and startups to such a social online community. Make an innovative sport.
Make an innovative sport.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Organize
wait,
event.
Could I just ask you to hold a sec? That's the kind of idea that we're actually looking for. Make an innovative sport. It's at the same time, it's kind of general, but it gives you really food for thought. How could you make a sport out of innovation, for example? It's kind of cool. That's it? Okay, keep going, keep going. Remember, you're looking for 1% of the ideas will be brilliant. That's the way it works, 1–2%.
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Roads and airport, I don't know, is it expected? Homes for investors and engineers.
Homes for investors and?
Engineers.
And engineers, so in the region. Yeah, excellent.
Leisure areas. Clubs.
Casinos, dance halls.
Central Square for chatting.
Central Square where it's set up for
Yeah,
chatting. A little bit like 3M did when they put the coffee machine and the whiteboards between marketing and design and engineering. Yeah. Anything
Buy
else?
business generator, I don't know what is it, but is it?
Buy a business generator?
Yeah.
I like
Idea generator.
An idea generator, that's a good one.
I don't know, is it infrastructure or not, but I think it's also a strong wish of many people also needed for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We didn't hear anything on the legal side, but there must be something on that as well coming out. Remember, we did this as just an exercise. It's just a first step.
You guys are losers. We have really hot stuff.
Yeah, good. I like that.
So a student can make an IPO and sell his shares to friends so that he can pay for his education and other
Excellent,
stuff.
excellent.
Oh, this one is nice. It's mentor dating. So if you are a single entrepreneur, you can find a 21-year-old
Mentor.
yeah, mentee of the other sex. And this could be a service. Probably not legally here, but could work in Russia. Give real projects with money to students who are talented but too modest.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. That's a beautiful one.
Have students pitch their ideas to real entrepreneurs for mentoring, and those who win actually get more mentoring and probably some funding. So,
yeah,
yeah,
that's a must, I think. I agree with that one.
And also do cross-school mentoring so that if you can find somebody to mentor in your school, you can probably find somebody in another school.
Which will also affect openness and push to openness. There's some really good ones there. What do you guys think of that? What do you think of that?
So Joshua, I think the comments were very, very important. They were talking about mentoring.
Mentoring,
you know, most people think that creativity, innovation is for the young. But there's one thing that the younger generation does not have. That's experience. And you could only get experience by living it. So I think there's an opportunity where the young creative minds team up with the more experienced gray hairs.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's a very great way of doing things.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's not institutionalized, really. There's no real structure that does that. There are some. There's Endeavor, right, does that a little bit.
A bit.
Yeah.
We try to do that in the business school with entrepreneurship mentors, too.
Yeah, but it's really an important step, isn't it? Okay, and now what theme do we have now?
You know, our team was very different, so I
Good.
don't even understand what we are talking about.
That's good. That's good. That's the first step.
That's innovation.
Okay,
That's innovation.
so the idea is to create an exchange center for I don't understand for what. but that what I don't understand, you can buy it and sell it
Right, okay.
like that.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Just give us two more ideas, because we've got a time pressure happening.
I see. Web community based on one of the popular social networks for startups.
Right. Well, yeah, we saw a startup yesterday doing that, in fact.
Two more, I think. The idea is to try candidate IP laws on small groups or small cities before you expand them to regional and federal level.
Oh, yeah, that's a nice
Yep.
one. Yeah.
And the final idea, let's have a travel to Black Box. Like that. That's it, thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks a lot for participating. How did you guys find the process? Did you like this process? You realize that if you do this in your teams or in your businesses, what you do is you take the social dynamic and the social domination drive away from group leaders, and you empower people to give ideas. That's the reason I use it in my work. But once you've done it once, it's not enough. You got to do it a few times. We have to wrap up because they're waiting for us to go away. But I just want to wrap up in terms of the ideal innovation region. What do you think, after all the discussion, for you is the top, just the three top, like on the Letterman show, the top three reasons, the top three things to do, really quickly, to make that region happen? Gigi.
Teach the kids from when they're young with the right culture values, and provide them access to resources and networking, and access to infrastructure.
Access to infrastructure. Scott.
I think it's risk-taking.
Risk-taking.
Like we indicated, and I think you want to play in a market that's big enough and start small and work in that. So define your market and your segments where you can play in the niche, irrespective of where that market is. And the last thing, hopefully what you create will have value. I mean, there's different ways to value it, but if you have a transparent legal system that places that value of ownership to what you create, then obviously you're going to have more people incentivized to create in your regions.
Yeah, bad legal systems are a huge disincentive.
Just a philosophy, I think that's a mindset of constant giving and taking of information and learning. So see yourself as a teacher to those around you, always mentor, and then always ask, what don't I know? And I think looking up to older generations is key.
Yeah, asking what I don't know, asking the funny questions.
As an entrepreneur, dare to dream, dream big, and then go out and do it.
Yeah, okay. All right, and my 3 things are thank you very much, you guys. That was 4. All right, thanks a lot.